J425 live. Skip the intro. August 5, Monday. Summer vacation's over here. A couple weeks away for school. Let's get it cracking. Just gonna run down a post I've got going up, talk about a couple things, and then get out of here. I'm gonna try and do this more often. Get into the podcasting and streaming a little bit more to just kind of supplement the stories that are going out. Also going to have a new podcast coming out that's going to cover Washington State prep football. Going to be doing that with a couple other guys, and I've got news on that coming. You guys are going to be excited about it. It's going to be separate. I'm going to publish it, but it's going to be a separate follow so that it won't be mixed in with the Lake Stevens news and stuff. But you'll see more on that shortly. So I've got a post today. It's called Politics, Port of Everett Expansion, Binda versus Larsen, Lake Stevens School District Bucks enrollment trends, etc. The primary is Tuesday. The first item that I kind of go over is the ballot measure on the Port of Everett, which is it's asking voters to approve an expansion of its boundary to encompass like the whole county. And the pluses of that are that the cities inside that boundary will then get access to the funds and resources so that they can build projects and also elect commissioners from inside that region as well so that you have control over it. Kind of go through a couple things about what a good job they've done recently overhauling the port, with the new commercial and restaurant improvements down there. Have you been to Fisherman Jack's? Pretty badass. That Hotel Indigo is a nice spot. They've got good stuff coming in there. The Everett Yacht Club renovation is really good. It's not cracking like 90s level, but they're coming in phases down there. And that thing, it always hasn't been the prettiest, the Port of Everett, but it's been a moneymaker. It's been an economic engine for a long time, super underappreciated. But they say 40,000 jobs per year in the 425 region can be credited to the Port of Everett, and they average $90K a year in salary. So that's a really good resource. I'm not going to be telling people how to vote and everything. I think it's a good idea in general, though, to have representation at the Port of Everett from people around here and to have access to their funds and stuff. Like, it's a place that's only going to be growing. And if they weren't doing such a good job with their management right now, I wouldn't be too keen on it. But have you been down there? I mean, they are really turning that place around. It's looking good. So you can read the pro and plus and minus in your voter pamphlet. They have a no person on there too. But I know that, talking to the city, seemed like the mayor thought this was a pretty good idea. And if it passes, then in about a year and a half, there'll be another measure where we can decide to expand the commissioners to up to 5 and then have a vote to see where they'll be selected from. So in theory, you could have a port commissioner from somebody here in Lake Stevens representing us on this. I think I've read that it's the biggest port of its kind on the West Coast, which is hard to believe, but, don't fact check me, but fact check me. Sticking on the ballot measure stuff, next item is Mercurial Linwood Councilman Josh Binda aims for Larsen's seat. You guys remember Josh Binda, right? Let's see here. Gotta have a picture of this guy somewhere. Oh, yeah. Josh Binda. That's him. That's him at the what is it called? He threw a Black History Month gala that he paid for and threw kind of in his honor, where he made himself like the main dude. And there he is in his zebra suit. You remember him? He's the guy that ran for Linwood Council during the pandemic, and he got a seat on there. A young dude, obviously, and he's been, around quite a bit since then. He did a speaking tour right away where he talked about, all the inspiring story of how I became a Linwood Council person, and he got some flack about that because of the attire that he was wearing, which is neither here nor there, in my opinion. that he was charging school districts to speak as a locally elected official. Iffy, not the best look. But so old Binda, let's get rid of him. Bye, Josh. Present. Bring my story back up. So he's running against Rick Larsen. He's one of 7 guys up against him in the primary there. And Rick Larsen is an Everett, Lake Stevens area dude looking for his 13th term at the House of Reps. He's pretty popular, pretty centrist. He's the ranking member on the Transpo Committee, and he is the chair of the Aerospace Committee. Ranking member of the Transpo Committee means next time the D's are in control of the House, he's the chair of Transpo, which has like $1 trillion 10-year budget. Long story short, the guy's got power, and he's done a pretty good job of navigating the center. He gets about 60% of the vote traditionally in the general elections. And when I was in politics, the guys I worked with had a good relationship with Rick in his office, and I always thought they're professional and that they did a good job of representing our community. So I can't say that for very many politicians. I don't have a lot of good things to say about hardly any of them, especially the Democrats that I worked with, to be honest. So I understand why Rick has been reelected quite a bit. He's a good retail politician, and he has done a good job doing complex work in DC. And, he's a tough guy to run against, I guess would be one way of putting it. So a little bit surprised when I saw that Josh Binda was running, especially coming off the controversies that Josh had been involved in. I write that, he's making the wager that his youth, identity, and personality will override a lack of experience in a spate of political self-owns. Binda won a spot on the Linwood City Council in a pandemic-era underdog campaign. At the time, the former Kamiak High School football player was leading local Black Lives Matter protests. After winning the election, Binda apparently left his job at Blue Origin to concentrate on council matters. I say that to say this. He posted he was an engineer at Blue Origin, which is like a, badass aerospace company. Like, okay. When you're a council person at Linwood or Lake Stevens, that's not a career. That's a $5,000 a year job. Nobody quits an engineering job to fully concentrate on the Linwood City Council. Something's off there, is what I'm saying. The engineering job is worth way more. So he leaves his job at Blue Origin. That and a paid self-promotion tour that hit up several local high schools and garnered some silly controversies around his attire, and some well-founded complaints around the fact that it's unusual for elected officials to use their office to arrange and promote paid speeches kind of surrounded him. Binda and controversial guerrilla journalist Photog Steve shot his promo materials in the Linwood Council chambers, which is a no-no. Got a rebuke from the city for that. Meaning you can't use your office or the council meeting chambers to have, your personal pay me to come speak campaign material done. You got to go do that on your own time, basically. Later, Binda was dinged with 3 separate PDC Public Disclosure Commission findings after the freshman councilman turned in receipts showing that he dumped $1,800 in campaign cash at the Armani store and spent another grip on haircuts, cosmetic, dental work, jewelry, and concert tickets. Listen, as a guy who's been fined, I think $10,000 by the PDC, I think I ended up paying $5,000, something like that. Represented myself against them for 5 years against an assistant AG in the actual trial. I understand how the PDC works. And listen, I'd take responsibility for it if I was really guilty of something bad. Mine was complete bullshit. I never even ran for office. It's only supposed to govern people who run for office. I just got caught up in Aaron Reardon's bullshit and had to just really eat one. But that said, I understand how a lot of the campaign filing stuff can be really difficult if you're new to it. And they expect you to just kind of know it. So I'm with Josh on that. They're wow, there's a lot of this disclosure stuff that I didn't know, and it kind of got overwhelming. And I didn't know that I couldn't spend my campaign donations on whatever I wanted. And, or maybe I did. And I thought that hey, I can buy some clothes. I need some clothes, and really is it for us to judge whether they're at Armani or Macy or what? No, it's not our job to judge that. If you needed clothes and clothes are okay, then clothes are okay. Haircuts, cosmetic, dental work, all of that, even if it's not okay, typically what happens is they're okay, no problem, Josh, first time go around, just pay it back. and no harm, no foul. Like they'll do that the first 2, 3, 4 times, really. They only get pissed off if you ignore them. And so Josh kind of went his own way on spending the campaign cash and then like ignored their 9 phone calls. They eventually got a hold of him and they got him onto a $1,200 payment plan, which was going to like roll everything up and let him off. But then he like didn't make those payments on schedule either. And they got testy. They yanked him down for an enforcement hearing. And the enforcement hearing was like recorded, and that's where a lot of good stuff came. So Binda goes down there and he tells the commission there's a couple problems that got him behind. First, he didn't see any of the 9 notices, right, sent to him by the commission. Second, he couldn't pay the fine because he didn't know how to write a check. Is that a good look for somebody who's like running to take over $1 trillion transportation budget? I'll leave that to you. Further, Binda told the commission he didn't realize his campaign finance filings would be so, quote, heavily scrutinized. I didn't know you were going to look at this shit. Quote, it is common, I think, for other politicians to, or other people to have late F1 filings. I didn't think it was something as severe as in the case of unintelligible, especially if it was 2 weeks or so, Binda was quoted in a Linwood Times article. Translation, I thought other people do this all the time. Binda is running to replace the incumbent who holds ranking member status on the Transpo Committee while chairing aerospace. Both positions require considerable budgeting acumen, although staffing and other resources are certainly allocated to augment member abilities. This might sound young of me, Binda told the PDC panel, but I've never written a check or done a check before. I don't have a checkbook or any of that sorts. So the whole checking process is fairly new to me. End quote. At the same time, Binda was struggling to pay PDC fines. He was also pulling in over $14,000 in booking fees for a local high school speaking tour and spending that same money in sizable chunks, just not on the PDC fines. This included a $2,000 payment to book a Black History Month gala in which he was the featured guest. At the same time, he told the PDC, quote, I recently got my car stolen and there's a bunch of other financial burdens I've been put under that I've not been able to pay that since, Binda told the PDC. Binda would later face a recall campaign citing the above PDC violation, spearheaded by a local policeman, retired. But Binda brought in the local branch of the NAACP to combat the recall, whose investigation found that Binda was the victim of a hostile workplace, actually. The recall effort didn't meet the signature threshold to move forward. Binda's still on council. To his colleagues at the Linwood Council, did they really like it that he got the NAACP to come in and call him racist, basically, for just simply like pointing out that he was a little bit disorganized with this shit? I don't know. So Binda filed to run against Larsen in January. He's campaigned on a pledge to end violence in Gaza, which definitely the left side of the party has been a fan of, and on the fact that if elected, he'd be the youngest Black congressman in state history. Last time I talked to him, I was like, Josh, most of the people in your district here are like white, and a lot of it is farmers up near Linden and that kind of stuff. Like, do you think they're really like looking at their ballot, trying to figure out when they can finally vote in the youngest Black congressman in state history, or is that like just an appeal to what you want? No answer. Binda, a graduate of Kamiak High School, served as an assistant football coach during the scandal-ridden 2022 season. Listen to this part. I'll start over. Binda, a graduate of Kamiak High School, served as an assistant football coach during the scandal-ridden 2022 season in which Julian Willis was arrested for abusing a volunteer football manager. Binda was briefly mentioned in the Willis charging documents, thanks to a bizarre interaction between a Mukilteo detective and the mother of the 17-year-old victim. Binda wasn't accused of wrongdoing, and it's unclear why Mukilteo PD chose to leave Binda's name in the report. Ballots must be postmarked by August 6th. I'm not going to go into detail on the Julian Willis thing right now. Just say Binda was a coach. He was an assistant coach on that same team. We know that a third assistant coach who actually blew the whistle on Julian said at the time that many players and coaches were aware of the wrongdoing. Kamiak never went back and did like a full study about who did what, who knew what. But just the weirdness of it is that, like, long story short, the detectives who kind of come in when they find out that Julian Willis has been raping this, sexually assaulting this 17-year-old volunteer football manager, they come into the school, start doing their investigation. They find out who the victim is. And they're like, okay, we have to go notify the mother of this victim now. So the detective from Mukilteo goes and calls the mother and goes, okay, mother, we're calling about your daughter, so-and-so. And we're calling about unfortunately, we have to inform you that, and then the mom like cuts them off and says, oh, I already know about this. I already know about the rumors with Josh Binda, but don't worry. There's nothing to that. My daughter's got a boyfriend and Josh is just her mentor. And the detective's like, ma'am, this is a Burger King, or whatever that meme is. He's like, no, Josh, no, not Josh Binda. Julian Willis, and then the mom's like, oh, I guess maybe I should have shut up. It's interesting because the police left Binda's name in the thing. The Muckleteel detective named him in there. And there's a lot of people they don't name. So why did they do that? I don't know. Maybe they're haters. They're probably just haters. But I asked Josh about it, and he was pretty pissed that he was in there, and he threatened to sue me at first, and then I convinced him that wasn't going to work, and then he tried a different tact, and we met last year, and I told him I wasn't going to dig into that, but it's also not my job to cover it up either. I mean, it's just there. So I'd like to ask him, since we know for sure that a third assistant coach blew the whistle and said other people knew. I just want to know who knew what when. And since Josh knew the girl really well, why? I'm just still pissed that Julian got 4 extra months to assault her, when people should have known. I'm not saying Josh had anything to do with that. I'm just telling you that his name was in the damn report. So, and he is not accused of wrongdoing in any way, shape, or form. He didn't coach any further after that year. And the Kamiak program is a dumpster fire. So just because he was there is not a bad look on him. In fact, all it shows us really is that the guy was volunteering to coach kids. And so, and to be a mentor to a young lady. So, you make of that what you will. As far as the election, if you want to vote for Josh or if you want to vote for Rick, you got to get that thing postmarked by the end of the day tomorrow, okay? And that's a primary. The top 2 will move forward. If Josh doesn't make it, probably not going to make it through that one tomorrow. He'll just still be at Linwood City Council, and he'll have to figure out what he wants to do from there. So we wish them all the best. Finally, final item. Just a little bit about the Lake Stevens School District, because a lot of the districts around the area are really struggling with budgets and decreasing enrollment, catastrophic decreasing enrollment. Marysville is just a complete open sore of a school system, right? People getting fired left and right, schools getting closed, complete attrition, all the programs, a lot of these budget problems, they're a combination of 2 things: declining enrollment, which is just less students. To back up a little bit, schools get funded on a per student basis. You can think of it as about 18 grand per student that they have enrolled. And so they kind of try to budget that out over the forward years, And so if those numbers go down, that's a shortfall of 18K, for each student they miss. And as that compounds, then they have to start laying people off, cutting programs, etc. They've been able to backfill that for a while because they got a bunch of one-time payments from pandemic era government largesse, basically. But those fund transfers, they were highly recommended not to be put into the budget, right? They're supposed to be used for other stuff, but a lot of these schools threw it into the budget anyways. And now, as that money's disappearing, the budget issues are compounding. The lack of enrollment or declining enrollment, compounding with the one-time funds expiring, is creating, huge problems. And you can just type it in Seattle Times, Herald, whatever. You'll see all sorts of districts on the western side of the state are suffering and having lots of schools closed and programs canceled and stuff. One place that isn't happening is Lake Stevens, where we still have a cap on transferring in because we're overcrowded. And because of the growth of this community and because of the great school district that we have here and the great community we have here, they've had a 9% enrollment increase over the last 8 years. And I think that things are scheduled to keep going in that direction, which is great. But it only takes just a quick glance around us to see these formerly strong school districts, be it Kamiak, Jackson, those places were they were fortresses back in the day, and the Marysville School District was really highly thought of too. They're gone, man. They're gone. Everything on the other side of the trestle is a war zone, and we're just an island here, a really nice island. We're like Hawaii, we're Oahu, or Manhattan. I don't know. But the point being is that as good as it is right now, would it be wise to not ignore some of these conditions out there? Because the declining enrollment, well, what's that coming from? Yeah, declining birth rates. Yes, the pandemic, and like people got used to like homeschool and realized, well, maybe I can homeschool my kids, or maybe I don't need to go to public school. There's another issue too, though. During the pandemic, 2020, that sort of time, that's when a lot of the most controversial social measures affecting our school districts now were brought in by the legislature. People weren't really paying attention, and they've been rolled into the schools now, and they're being rolled out, and a lot of people aren't happy about them. And you're reading more and more about it, and it's because things are going from being a hypothetical discussion to being practical. And the one thing I'm talking about specifically is gender policy. And it's everywhere now, right? Like you're seeing it everywhere. And that's because things are just reaching a critical mass. 6 years ago was Jordan Peterson talking about hypothetical use of pronouns, and now you have to fight to protect language because blah, blah, blah. Now you just saw a biological man beat the shit out of a woman in the Olympics. And now 2 XY chromosome people are going to fight for a gold medal in the female boxing championships of the Olympics. And with these things, they're really complicated. It's hard to tell what the facts are. I'll give you some good links later, especially for this topic, so you can cut through the bullshit, because there's always going to be truth, and it's not always in the middle either. There's always just these different emphasis and narratives going on. With respect to like the Olympic boxing thing, we all got to be on the same side that we don't want men beating the shit out of women in combat sports. We just got to start there, and then you can back up from there. And as far as like, what is a man and like transgender, all that stuff, I don't even think that it comes into it as much. And the Olympic thing really cuts it clear, because neither of those boxers are transgender. They're not. They don't live that lifestyle. And you know what? No one else is doing that over in like Eastern Europe or Asia. Like they're not going to be doing Western transgender type shit. These are people that that were likely, we don't know 100%, but we do know that the World Boxing Amateur Association tested them and barred them and stripped them and found that they had a competitive advantage. And from everything that I've read and some experts, that looked at the tests and stuff, what likely happened is these are 2 individuals that had some sexual differences in their development, meaning, long story short, some people are born with male chromosomes, XY, and then they'll have male testes, but they won't have like visible genitalia maybe when they're born. So they might be labeled female on their birth certificate and even raised as female. Like I'm sure that that's the case, like when they say that. But the point of fact is, like, both of these athletes had testes, which means they had the ability to take testosterone. They had the ability to create it and to then apply it to their bodies. Like they had that portion of the male system. And so what that does is, testosterone, you can think of it as just like, well, it's an anabolic steroid. And so what it does is, imagine you have 2 people of the same size and same height, same weight, same dimensions. If one has testosterone and the other doesn't, they're just going to have a 30% strength and quickness advantage over the other one. Okay. And so when you think of something like combat sports, boxing, I said strength and quickness, right? So you got somebody who's got a lifetime of testosterone and is still getting it. This isn't somebody who quit and just had it. Like they still have testosterone. So that means that the strength and quickness is compounded, because a punch is not a static thing. It's both of those things, right? It's strength compounded by quickness. And so that's 30% compounded by 30%. I don't know the math of that when you're talking about the physics of a punch, but I know the result is that like the Italian chick goes down on her knees and says, "I can't win, it's a man," and starts crying. You saw it. And so, what's going to happen? Like, does a girl have to die in front of us? I don't even think that would stop it, because, they lie straight to your face when they explain it to you later. The IOC is lying to you. They know what this is, and you can tell by what they don't say. That's like the key to the public relations of this stuff. Look for the stuff they don't say. Look for what they don't want to admit, okay? They don't want to talk about the test these people failed before. They don't want to talk about, whether they have testes, whether they're producing testosterone, what their chromosomes are. They just want to like make it some like, social gender issue. It's not a gender issue. Gender is the outward like portrayal of what you're, of whether you're male or female. Sex is the term for what they are. Sex is the biological condition. And if you have Your body's producing testosterone and you have testes. You can't be fighting women. You just can't be, and we got to be able to like get together on that, because I don't really see what the benefit is to like cheering on dudes to beating up women. Like, who is behind that anyways? Like, what is the point of that? It's totally sus. It's gross. And people are just going to get pissed off about that, for sure. Right now, everybody's super confused because the terms are all confusing and they hijack the language, and the media is horrible, right? It's always like she, but he might be he, she. Well, it's really hard to tell what's going on. And I know there's a lot of well-meaning people who are like, well, they're probably women who just like look weird, or, weird's not the right term, you know what I mean? Who just, they're probably women who, I don't know, have increased X or Y or Z, or, it could be this or that. It's just not the case. All right. That's not the case for these two. Look at them. You can just tell when you look at them. Doesn't mean that they're at fault or they're bad people. Doesn't mean they're lying about like how they're raised or anything. That's not the point, though. The point is about preserving the fairness of a competition and preserving a place for women's sports. Okay. That's more important than any one dude or any two dudes. There's plenty of dudes. We need to protect the women. And like, I'm going to be with that until the very end. And I'm going to keep harping on it, especially because this stuff is coming up in high schools. Transition point. As a matter of fact, right now, it is the current policy at Lake Stevens School District that if a male decides he wants to play a female sport, they have to let him. They have to let him play in the sport that aligns with their gender identity. That is the current rules, okay? And so you're thinking, well, luckily we've split off like the combat sports. We have a girls wrestling team and a boys wrestling team. That won't prevent shit, because if a boy says he's a girl, he just goes and wrestles on the girls team, right? Yeah, that can happen. That can happen. And you're seeing some of the most danger in these things happen in the combat sports and then in volleyball, where you get guys in there and there's been some pretty bad injuries. You can just Google it and check it out. Plus, it's not fucking fair. It's not fair. I mean, that's not the way that any of this was set up. We didn't do all of this Title IX and as a fan of girls sports, man, they are awesome. They're better athletes than guys. They compete harder. They have more heart. They don't deserve to have somebody with just 30% natural off rip advantage like lumber in. And yeah, the girls could probably still beat him in a lot of cases and stuff, but it's not fair. They shouldn't have to. It makes you have to win in a different way. And it takes out, the safety, the intimacy. Like you think about the guy, Leah Thomas guy, right? Like, I can't believe that people bought it at the time, but in retrospect, we now know Leah Thomas, the swimmer, Will Thomas, he never stopped being with his girlfriend the whole time, right? He didn't change anything except he said he was a girl, and then he swam as a girl, and then he took medals from girls, and he laughed about it, but he was still effing girls the whole time. He hadn't changed his life. He was laughing at all of you. And he had a bunch of people like on his side, how brave and all this shit. But look at the girls. You could tell right away from the girls. They knew. You could tell at the medal podium. And this is before Riley Gaines got big and everything. You see 5 girls gathered around each other, hugging each other, congratulating each other. Nowhere near that son of a bitch. And they edited the video and stuff so you can't hear it. But you can go onto YouTube and type in Leah Thomas, Ivy League championships or whatever. The people in the crowd are booing him. They are pissed off at him. Like, they didn't show that on the news, but people know. People know. So we knew that back then, even though when everybody was trying to tell us he's brave, same stuff going on right now. Like, you are going to know in the core of your like soul, this is pre-programmed into us. You'll be able to look and see and know what's going on. And if you don't, you've been brainwashed too much, So long story short, that kind of transitions me into talking about Lake Stevens School District being on solid footing with their budgeting and with their enrollment and how good everything is going there. Everybody wants to go here. Enrollment is up, and they have a bond measure scheduled for this fall. The district does, and we've always had great bond support at Lake Stevens. My mom was the communications director for many years. She never lost a levy or bond campaign. I volunteered on the citizens committee a couple times. I remember after we did the stadium bond measure, I called Chris Pratt, and he was married to Anna Ferris then. They came up on a day's notice when I called him, and they christened the new stadium. And Anna did a cheerleading clinic for the Viking cheerleaders and the little kids. It was awesome. And so that was when we did the stadium to get it up to like the current size. It must have been 2008 or 9, something like that. And then I left for 10 years or whatever. But point being, I think the last ballot measure is 2016, something like that. And now we've got another one coming up, and they're going to be asking for some money to do some brick and mortar work, build a new elementary, do upgrades on middle school, high school. I'll get you all that information later. The point that I'm getting at here and kind of working it into the enrollment stuff and like, the finances of the districts. Let me shut this door. This is the first bond measure. This is the first public ballot measure since the adoption of the controversial policy that allows district employees to assist in the social transitioning of students without informing parents. There you have it. First time that we got a public ballot measure coming since the district implemented the policy that says, yes, if you're a boy and you say you're a girl, you can play girl sports. We will let you do that. We will let you in the locker room. The policy also says, yes, we will socially transition you if you want to be. We will change your name, and we do not have to tell your parents. In fact, if we think your parent are against it and are not supporting your social transition, there are further steps we can take. And this stuff, it seems so far out there that you don't think it's really happening or it can't happen. I'm not sure if it's happening at Lake Stevens yet, but this is happening elsewhere, okay? This really is happening at schools where a kid will go into school and some counselor will pull them aside and talk to them about how they want to be a boy now. They'll change their name. They won't tell the parents. And they set them on this path that has become much less clear than it was even in 2019, 2020, when this legislation came into place. Like they were asserting a lot of things as fact in this legislation that have since been disproven. Okay. Like the path for childhood transition, gender transition has become super, super murky and questionable. And with the risk being sterilization, surgeries that permanently maim children, psychosomatic conditions, just like life-changing and threatening decisions that can never be reversed, that can be undertaken without even consulting a parent. Like that's crazy, right? Like, especially since like at the time this was couched as, well, this is the best thing for kids, and if we don't do it, they're going to off themselves. That was always bullshit. But it was also founded at the time on some of the best, I wouldn't say like studies, but just like the consensus at that time was that like this is the best thing to do. But so the Western European nations and stuff that were kind of at the forefront of gender transitioning of kids and stuff, they were years ahead of us. Like they were doing this stuff maybe 10 years before. And so it seemed like they were at the forefront, and like maybe it seemed to some people like if we followed their policy, we'd be right there with them. Well, in the ensuing years, they haven't kept going. They've reversed and gone the other direction because they found that there's not really any science to show that the gender transitioning of children is anything good about it. It doesn't result in anything definitive. And in fact, there's a lot of risk in it. There's risk because the so-called puberty blockers that are supposed to just like give you a pause, you can't just get a pause in development and go back to it. Plus, it turns out that the puberty blockers are actually the same drug that we use to sterilize like convicted rapists, like full-grown men, like we used off-label here as a puberty blocker, and turns out it's sterilizing kids. Oops. I guess we should have checked into that one, right? Like in a lot of the best theories for this sort of thing, one is called the Dutch protocol. The Dutch protocol is just this way of thinking, the way of treating gender transition that resulted in the gender affirming way of doing things, which basically means that like whatever you say you are, we're just going to say, yeah, you're right, that's what you are. And then we're going to take whatever steps to also have your body match whatever you say you are. I know it sounds crazy, and in fact, this is how crazy it is. The medical transitioning of children, which has involved like radical mastectomies on 13-year-olds, I'll link some, it's the only part of medicine where doctors are literally cutting off healthy body parts to match a psychosomatic condition. Like, they don't do that anywhere else, and they're doing it on kids. It is really happening, and we are far enough down that road where we are starting to see the first detransitioner lawsuits come through. What I mean by that, these edge cases where like as this policy was introduced in 2020 here, Well, so the bad things that happened, like the worst case scenarios that happened at public schools around the country in 2021, 2022, they're working their way through the federal court cases right now. There's a shitload of them. And these things are shocking. They are so emotional. They're so devastating. And, they all kind of go the same route. Like some employee at the school district tells the kid that they're actually this, and then this chain of horrible things happens. Listen, I'll just go off what I write here. Let's see. So this will be the first public ballot measure since the adoption of a controversial policy that allows district employees to assist in the social transitioning of students without informing parents. And as a spate of high-profile so-called detransitioner lawsuits work their way through the courts, parents find themselves presented with the soul-shattering details of what has actually been occurring in the name of inclusion and equity. And I'm saying that because I don't think a lot of people still know what's really going on. And I know I've been trying to hammer this stuff home, and I'm going to keep doing it because this is real. We're talking about lawsuits with narratives that begin like this. Luca Hine had both breasts removed as a 16-year-old in Nebraska. Chloe Cole in California was a year younger when she had her double mastectomy. She'd been on testosterone and puberty blocking drugs since 13, 6 months after a sexual assault. So both of those cases, obviously, they weren't happy with what happened to them. And then there's the one in Virginia where the high school counselor convinced a 90-pound girl that she was a boy, transitioned her without telling the mother, and the chain of events that occurs next is beyond the imaginable depths of hell. The school district won't likely survive the aftermath. I'm going to tell you about that one in a second. As the cases reach trial, expect the moment where a permanently maimed child is in tears on the witness stand, looking at the adults across from her in shock. Why didn't you stop me? Is the question. So far, courts are not impressed with the answers provided by clinicians and advocates of the childhood transitioning. So back to the point at hand. Could this social transitioning policy that's been adopted in Lake Stevens schools and Washington State contribute to a growing exodus from the public school ranks? Could the upcoming bond vote be seen as a referendum on this sort of thing? Could parents leverage it and say, hey, we want to support the bond vote, but we want a pledge from you guys that you're going to keep us in the loop? You don't need to get them to, we can't ask the school district to disavow a policy that's mandated by the state. We could ask for, can we keep the communication open at the very least, or something like that. Back to the point at hand. Could social transitioning policy contribute to a growing exodus from the public school ranks? I mean, what would you not be willing to do if you thought someone was going to push your 12-year-old on the path to a radical mastectomy or sterilization when you weren't looking? People will kill over that shit. I mean, I hate to put it, but that's obvious. These are children, right? Yours. Imagine the fallout from this thing. Imagine. If anything, the subject is the ticking time bomb of all ticking time bombs, because people still don't know what's going on. And I harp on it because I believe that, like Stevens School District, for one, is in a position to enjoy first mover status and demonstrate a moral and financially responsible path on this topic that could be followed by other districts who wish to keep their kids safe and their parents engaged. Meaning, this was all well-meaning when it went in, for sure, 100%. There's nobody at Lake Stevens School District on the school board who's doing anything but what they think is best for kids. The information wasn't good, okay? The people who are supplying the information, mainly a bunch of non-medical organizations, you could call them like policy advocates, you could call them people with they have a stake. They have an interest in the measure. So point being that decisions were made based on the information that was available at the time. As the dude famously said, some new shit has come to light. Is that correct? Yeah. New shit has come to light. Anyways, if new shit comes to light, you have to make a new decision. So I'm hoping the Lake Stevens School District can avoid this whole horrible, possibility, because we can't afford to have this happen to one kid. And I'm going to give you this case about this Virginia thing. This cannot happen to one. We can't keep going with that attitude that we've had about the predators around here where, all right, we let Chris Mattingly have 6, but gosh, I guess we better draw the line at 7, or whatever. Bullshit, bullshit. And that's exactly why too, that like Stevens School District, among all, we're not in a position to have some expert, corner your kid when you're not there and start talking to them about their gender identity and, their genitalia and all that stuff. We don't trust you. You got 30 years of like predators. Like, and we've seen how you deal with them. We've seen how you dealt with Mattingly. Like, I'm going to link it in here. You got the school's lawyer saying to him, gosh, Chris, like, this is, you done 6 of them before this, how's this going to look if they find out, right? Like, that's not the way that any of us would react if there was a molester in our home or in our area, right? Like, I mean, just imagine it. Like, what if let's say that you hired a piano teacher instead of the teacher at the school, right? We got a piano teacher. You bring in your piano teacher, they molest one kid. You're going to be after him with an axe, right? You're not going to bring him back to go through 6 more kids and then talk about, oh shit, my insurance policy and liability. And oh my God, like I had a pledge to those guys that I would like work through arbitration. No, it is a life like altering disaster if a kid gets hurt like that. Why is it any different at the school district? That shit needs to change. And if you need to get sued a couple times by the whatever teachers union, fine. Make them sue you for firing a fucking pedophile. Big deal. We'll give you a firm handshake and like a wreath and a promotion. So at the local level, the inclusion of the policy is state mandated, but the model policy is outdated and features language that's come under considerable scrutiny. Earlier this year, the UK banned the use of puberty blockers on minors, shuttered the world's largest youth gender clinic, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Read about that. So I'm going to link to the other districts that are having issues with this, some of the lawsuits that are going on. And then I linked to my original story on this. So this is the article that I've got ready for today. Now I'm going to give you a little bit about the use case, the Virginia case. I don't know if I'll include this on the actual video, but I'm going to go to it now. Let's see here. I'm going to read this. These things always make me emotional. All right, so what I've got here is Michelle Blair versus Appomattox County School Board, okay? And this was filed, this is going through the courts right now. It's filed August of 2023. These are all going to be federal court cases. So that means they're all going to end up at the Supreme Court, right? Eventually, we know what the Supreme Court is. We know it's 6-3 conservative. So you can kind of, if you're into the real politic of like, if you're a school finance person and you got to really try to figure out where this is headed, where do you think it's headed? Who do you think they're going to side with? The 6-3 Roberts Court on this kind of stuff, okay? It's not about what you believe or what you feel. It's about where do you think this is headed? Stick a finger in the wind, make a prediction. Because you got to plan the future of our school district, right? So like make a good call here. Okay, so this lawsuit is plaintiff Michelle Blair filing a complaint against the Appomattox County School Board, the entire board individually and in its entirety, the superintendent, the principal, the counselor who talked to the student, and then a prosecutor who got involved later. But basically everybody at the high school who was involved in the gender transition of this kid is named in this thing individually and in their professional. So she is suing them for constitutional breaches, tortious interference with the parent-child relationship, conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, professional malpractice, and other rights under Virginia law. The federal law is, there's constitutional protections about being able to parent, evidently, and I'm not really sure which one that falls under, but all these cases kind of refer to the same thing, and that's why they're taken under federal court. So, the defendants deliberately concealed from plaintiff information related to her daughter's asserted gender identity, and their efforts to assert her discordant gender identity, including the use of an alternate name and pronouns, and the use of opposite sex restroom facilities, resulted in a whole bunch of damages. I'm going to try and just get to the narrative of this here. Okay. So the victim is named SB in this, and you can just think of her as a freshman. And she is a kind of an androgynous, quiet, depressed, gothic type kid. Okay. She got a lot of mental health issues. She's been adopted and she went through a really bad early childhood trauma. She's a sweet kid, quiet, sticks to herself, likes her goth stuff. Her mom helps her shop for that, and she's proud of that kind of, but hasn't been somebody really into gender stuff. Okay. A cutter, yeah, some body dysmorphic stuff, but yeah, not gender. So she began to experience some distress about her body. She wanted baggy clothes and stuff, but she's a tiny person. She's like 90 pounds. She's very thin. She had depression, eating disorders, self-harm. This is all documented. It's going to be in her school file too. All right. So she was in middle school. The counselors there helped her with these conditions. They documented them, etc. So she had inpatient for like 6 months. Their schools are aware of this. She gets out of inpatient. She's doing better. That brings us up to her freshman year. She's going to start high school. Her mom makes sure the staff has all her mental health records, major depressive disorder, recurrent episodes, self-harm, etc. Um, she's gender nonconforming in her dress. She likes the emo style, goth style, skateboard, baggy, etc. Okay, so mom drops her off at the school bus on the first day of school. First day of school, the peers are not that accepting of her choices on the bus. They bully the shit out of her. Group of boys on the bus being a group of dickhead boys, threatening her, harassing her, touching her. So she walks into school on the first day and she's talking about it. And the SB is overheard talking about referring to a male nickname and talking about maybe how it'd be better to be a boy, just kind of offhand. That is overheard by the teacher and told to a counselor. The counselor promptly the same day finds SB in the hallway and asks her if she wants to be a boy or a girl. SB indicated that she had identified as a boy earlier, earlier in the day. Without any further inquiry, um, the counselor told the kid that you're a boy now. You will use the male restroom at school, and we can meet later to talk about your new name and some other steps you'll need to take. This is a little more than the kid was ready for, but that's what happens. Initially, she goes into the boys' bathroom and she's harassed physically, touched, bullied. That happens 2 out of the first 3 days. It's a problem. 8 of the first 12 days of her first time in high school, that counselor brings her into the counseling room and spends hours with her about gender stuff. Teaches her all the theory, gives her access to websites, to social platforms, to, all of that kind of stuff. Possible names, that kind of thing. Reinforces that she's a boy now. She's got to learn to be comfortable in the boys' bathroom, all that kind of stuff. She's not feeling too good about it, though, because she's getting this kind of abused and the shit kicked out of her in the bathrooms. The counselor also didn't incorporate any of the mental conditions at all. None of it. She just ignored all of it and does this huge transformation on the kid off rip that she doesn't even know. And she doesn't inform the parent of any of it, okay? She didn't notify the middle school people the high school person doesn't. So mom doesn't know that her daughter is now a boy or that she's using the boys' bathroom and getting abused. 90-pound girl forced to use the boys' bathroom, not liking and getting abused. So it gets worse. The next week, so we're on like day 6. She reports that the boys on the bus beat her, grab her by the hair, threaten to sodomize her, and stick her out the window, other things. Other students go and tell the principal that they threatened to shoot her and told her that they know where she lived and that she needed to stop pretending to be a boy. The principal and the guidance counselor reviewed the recordings, listened to the complaints, and wrote off the behavior as non-threatening. They didn't tell the parent. Again, didn't find out about this. So the kid's processing this, we're going to kill you unless you stop acting like a boy. So the guidance counselor sees the kid kind of backing off on her new boy identity and reasserts that you have to buy into this fully. You need to get into the boys' bathroom. You need to live this. Gives her a new name. The new name is D. That's her boy name. So things get worse again. So on the dates of August 12th and August 25th, she is assaulted in the bathroom, the boys' bathroom that she's forced to go in. Boys were following her in a group, touching her, threatening her with a knife, violence, rape, shoving. It goes into some descriptions of some of the physical stuff that happens to her. She tries to report this, but it falls on deaf ears, and instead the counselor calls her in to talk to her about how to be a better boy, basically, how to better identify as a boy and how to affirm and promote that identity. She's not worried about what's happening to her. The lawyer then writes that a child's assertion of a discordant gender identity is a mental health concern, and that the counselor's actions in inserting this new gender identity into this, unwell kid's mind is a psychological intervention that was done without care for existing conditions and done without notifying the parent. So we're already off to a really dangerous start here, right? Like that's already well into violation. You could be sued really badly for that. So at no point did the counselor notify Mrs. Blair that they're counseling her daughter about transgender identities or affirming her as a male, or encouraging the diminutive teenage girl to use the male restrooms despite the repeated abuse, sexual harassment, and threats. So on August 24th, the counselor and a second counselor meet with SB to talk to her about what's happened to her in the boys' bathroom. The counselors mentioned concerns raised about using the boys' bathroom, and SB made her complaint. She said she was threatened, harassed, and sexually assaulted when using the restroom. She told the counselors that all the boys are rapists, quote, all the boys are rapists, and explained that she defined rape as inappropriate touching, sexual touching without her permission. The counselors and SB agreed that she would begin using the nurse's restroom, which she could get into on her own and lock. Even in light of the new reports of her reporting rape and assault, and the threats to her life, the counselor did not notify the parent about the male identity, the use of the male names, the pronouns, none of it. The mom was notified that her daughter was given a Tylenol at school, though. The counselor then asked the school resource officer, the cop, to review the school surveillance tape and to talk to SB about what happened in the bathrooms, the reported rapes and stuff. There's no camera inside the bathroom. The parent is not informed about the surveillance tapes, and they don't inform the parent before the police officer interviews SB. So freshman girl raped, abused multiple times, psychological problems. Now she's going to be interviewed by a cop without the parent knowing any. But imagine how mad you'd be. All right. The counselor and the cop interrogate the girl without her parents being notified and no one present on her behalf. The tape shows that they imply that the girl had fabricated the reports of threats of rape from the males, and they pressure her to recant the story. They say, some of what you said was true and some was untrue. When you report information to us, it is important to tell the entire story. You never want to falsify a report. When you said yesterday that every boy in the school is a rapist, it is not fair to label every boy in the school a rapist. She says, I said every boy in the bathroom was a rapist. Counselor, that is considered defamation of character. If you walked out of here and said every boy is a rapist and a boy called his dad who had money, he could sue you for defamation. And when you have no basis to call every boy in the school a rapist, you'd have no money, you'd lose. I'm not saying there's not an individual in the town that is is not that, but you can't confidently say it. And I know that you can't say everyone here is a rapist. You need to recant your statement. And it is important to know that you cannot say things just because you are upset. This is how Officer Gunter used a coercive tactic to try to get the 14-year-old child to recant, threatening her with a civil lawsuit. This is amazing. This part is amazing. So the kid, SB, she stands right up to this. She defends her statements. This is what she says. Check out this. Listen, I didn't want to tell you anything about this. Anytime you've called me in here for something, I didn't want to tell you about any of it because I don't trust you. But I know that you are here to uphold the law because that's your job and that's the way it's supposed to be. I know that you are supposed to keep your students safe. So I believe that if you hear something about rape, I'm pretty sure that you have to do something. That's what she tells him. Isn't she brave? And they kind of look at each other in the interview. Then it goes into the policy that says what the school is supposed to do when they get a report of rape. Obviously, all sorts of actions are supposed to be taken. Title IX, protections. Nothing happens to her. Nothing happens to protect her. They don't do anything to the boys. And from there, the boys find out basically that she's ratted on them, and then they again threaten her life. They say they know where she lives, and that they're going to kill her, and they're going to kill her family. Okay. All because she was transitioned to a boy and forced to go into the boys' bathroom where, I'm assuming, somewhat attractive little 90-pound girl that these boys are all over, again and again and again. And then she's just told to go back in there. And her parents can't help her. No one can help her. She's on her own. Now she's being told that she's going to be killed and that they're going to kill her family. And we know she's already not in the right frame of mind and everything like that. So that's where she comes to the conclusion that she needs to run away. So she goes home and she leaves a note for her mom and says, I love you, but I've got to go. You're not safe as long as I'm here. And she runs away. I'm going to just cut to the chase here. This is too much. So. Okay, so she feared continuing harassment and insults at the school, so she decided to run away. She was quickly found at a truck stop by an adult male who kidnapped SB, drugged, and violently raped her in the backseat of his car. It was this man that she lost her virginity to. He then drove her to Washington, D.C., and left her with two men who raped and drugged her again. To be clear, he trafficked her. He sold her. A guy found her, raped her, drugged her, sold her to two other guys. These two men drove her to Maryland and left her with a third guy, fourth guy, a registered sex offender. Trafficked another time. He kept her in a locked room after raping her and trafficked her to another guy. Okay? This is true. Let me go over this again. She runs away that night. She's found at a truck stop, kidnapped, drugged, violently raped. He takes her to the next set of people in Washington, D.C., sells her to two men who do the same thing to her again. These two sell her to two guys in Maryland, do the same thing to her again, who sell her to a registered sex offender who keeps her in a locked room after raping her and trafficking her to other men. Her mom doesn't even know that she has become a boy yet, technically, right? And all this is happening. So eventually, after 6 weeks, she's found and rescued from a sex offender's home in Baltimore. And mom comes to pick her up. They have a tearful reunion. And right as they're about to go home, public defender comes out and takes the kid away and says that they can't let her go home with the parents because she just heard them call her by her birth name. And this is a transgender boy who wants to be called D. And the mom just was disrespecting that. Now, mom had not even been told yet. No one had even told her, right? Like she had not even been told about it at all. Second, the kid didn't care about any of that shit. She just wanted to go home. The public defender is one of these political whatevers. Oh, you misgendered him. You dead named him. All this bullshit. Calling CPS. You can't have your kid who's just been raped by 5 different sets of, unbelievable. So they take her away from her mom, and this public defender gets CPS involved, or their version of it over there. And this mom, her mom, SB's mom, turns out she's like a certified saint. She's been a foster mom to all these abused kids before. She's an expert in that. And so she clears an investigation by CPS quickly, which you're not, if that's going to happen to you, you're not going to get cleared. Like they just are, it's just not likely to happen. It's super hard, but she's already been vetted. So it's like really hard to pin her as like a bad person or whatever. So she's cleared. And after that, she finally, it takes another 2 weeks. She finally gets past the lawyer who's keeping her kid from her and then brings her home. And then the long path to health begins. And eventually she gets a lawyer and now they're suing, right? But long story short, she sent her to start her high school career on the bus, right? She got beat up a little bit on the bus. And then as a result of that, the high school counselor thought, we should transition you. That happened in secret. And she was forced into the boys' bathroom where she was repeatedly abused and forced to go back in there. She had no allies at the school. They accused her of lying about it, but they wouldn't let her stop going to the boys' bathroom. They never told her mom. And eventually she was assaulted and threatened so many times that she thought she had to run away to be safe, all because of the new identity that the school had given her without her mom knowing. As soon as she ran away, raped, trafficked 4 times over, okay? This is all a direct result of what the school district did without involving the parents and without any sort of basis, like ignoring all of her conditions, etc. This is probably the most extreme one I've read as far as like what happens to the kid. That chain of events that happens after she runs away is unbelievable. But there are so many lawsuits like this right now where the counselor gets involved and either convinces the kid to get on drugs that lead to sterilization or like a mastectomy that they don't want, or when the parents do get involved, the counselor at the school leverages the CPS or whoever against the parents and like leverages it to get the kid taken away or to cause a huge legal battle or just any number of horrible things. And I'm going to just keep going over these cases so that you have an idea of what can happen when there's a policy in place like there is right now that says if somebody at the school thinks that it's a good idea to socially transition your kid, they are able to do that. They can do it without telling you, and they can leverage your opposition to it against you. We need to do something about that policy now, okay? I don't know what it is, but this stuff is already in law. It's already in school policy. You can take a look at it. It's in my article now. I linked to the original policy and all of this information in the story too. And simply put, like this is not a situation that's going to end well because aside from the moral implications, which are first and foremost, take all of that out and just do the real politic. These lawsuits are all going to be winners. They're going to be winners from the perspective of the person who is bringing it is going to win damages because they're owed damages, right? And because the end result is the Supreme Court that's conservative. So these districts that have done this, they're all going to lose. They're going to settle or they're going to lose. And you know what? They fucked up. They deserve that. But like, so you can see that this is not a winning tact, like even taking the heart out of it. The heart and the taking care of kids needs to be first. And so if we can get this policy altered before any kids get ripped apart from their parents or transitioned without their family being with them or, set on a path that we don't know the medical result to, like that would be great. It'd be great to just kind of take some leadership on this and not have to lose any kids to this. So that's why I include it. And I'm going to keep updating you guys on this stuff because this is going to be an emerging issue that's only going to get bigger because these policies are just now reaching maturity in school districts across, especially all the liberal states. So that's what I've got for you today. And yeah, sorry it wasn't so mature. I'll try and do better tomorrow. All right, J425 out. Follow me at J425 Live on Instagram, J425 Baby, and 425 Kev on X. And you can email me at publisher@thejournal425.com. I'll be back tomorrow or the next day. We're going to talk Viking football, and I'm going to let you know about the new football podcast we have coming out. All right, thanks. Bye.